Hello, and welcome to this recording of Book 21 of Emily Wilson's translation of Homer's Odyssey, and she entitles Book 21 An Archery Contest. With glinting eyes, Athena put a thought into the mind of wise Penelope, the daughter of Icarius, to place the bow and iron axes in the hall of great Odysseus, and set the contest, which would begin the slaughter. She went up to her own room. Her muscular, firm hand picked up the ivory handle of the key, a hook of bronze. Then, with her slaves, she walked down to the storeroom where the master kept his treasure, gold and bronze and well-wrought iron. The curving bow and deadly arrows lay there, given by Iphitus, Eurytus' son, the godlike man he happened to befriend at wise Orcholochus' house far off in Lacedaemon in Messenia. Odysseus had gone to claim a debt. Some people of Messenia had come in rowing boats and poached 300 sheep from Ithaca. They took their shepherds too. Laertes and the other older men had sent Odysseus to fetch them back when he was still a boy, and Iphitus had come there for his horses, 12 fine mares, each suckling a sturdy mule. These horses would later cause his death when he had gone to visit Heracles, who welcomed him but killed him so that he could take the horses, betraying hospitality and heedless about the watchful gods. Before all that, when Iphitus first met Odysseus, he gave this bow to him, inherited from his own father. And Odysseus gave Iphitus a sword and spear to mark their bond. But Iphitus was dead before the friends could visit one another's houses. So when Odysseus's black fleet sailed to war, he did not take the bow, but stored it in his own house to use in Ithaca in memory of his friend. The queen had reached the storeroom, and she stepped across the threshold of polished oak. A skillful carpenter had set it level, fixed the frame, and built the dazzling double doors. She quickly loosed the door thong from its hook, pushed in the key, and with true aim, thrust back the fastenings. The fine doors, as the key struck home, began to bellow, as a bull at pasture bellows. At once they flew apart. She stepped inside onto the pallet, where the scented clothes were stored in chests, and reached to lift the bow down from its hook, still in its shining case. She sat down on the floor to take it out, resting it on her lap, and started sobbing and wailing as she saw her husband's bow. At last she dried her eyes, and in her arms picked up the curving bow and quiver packed with many deadly arrows, and she went to meet her arrogant suitors. Slaves lugged out a hamper with their master's many axes of bronze and iron for the competition. The queen came near the suitors, and she stopped beside a pillar with a filmy veil across her face. 2 slave girls stood with her. She said, "Now listen, lords. You keep on coming to this house every day to eat and drink, wasting the wealth of someone who has been away too long. Your motives are no secret. You want to marry me. I am the prize. So I will set a contest. This great bow belonged to godlike King Odysseus. If anyone can grasp it in his hands and string it easily and shoot through all 12 axes, I will marry him and leave this beautiful rich house, so full of life, my lovely bridal home. I think I will remember it forever, even in my dreams." She told Eumaeus he should set the bow and pale gray iron axes up before the suitors, and in tears The swineherd took them and did as she had asked. The cowherd wept also when he saw his master's bow. Antinous began to scold and taunt them. He said, "You idiots, you tactless peasants, so thoughtless, so undisciplined, you fools, your selfish crying is upsetting her. Poor lady, she is sad enough already at losing her beloved husband. Sit and eat in silence, or go do your wailing outside and leave us suitors here to try the deadly contest of the bow. I think it will be difficult. Not one of us can match Odysseus. I saw him once in childhood, and I still remember him." He hoped he would be first to string the bow and shoot through all the axes, but he would be first to taste an arrow from the hands of great Odysseus, whom he had mocked, urging the others on to do the same. Then Prince Telemachus addressed them all. "Zeus must have made me stupid. My dear mother, despite her usual common sense, has said that she will marry someone else and leave this house. But I am laughing, and my heart feels foolish gladness. Well, come on, you suitors, you want this prize, a woman unlike any in holy Pylos, Argos, or Messene, or here in Ithaca, or on the mainland. No woman in Achaea is like her. There is no need for me to praise my mother. You know her worth, so do not make excuses. Do not put off the contest of the bow. We want to watch, and I will try myself. If I succeed in stringing it and shooting all through, I will no longer mind if mother goes off with someone else and leaves me here. Success would prove me man enough to carry my father's arms." He stood up straight and tall, tossed off his purple cloak, unstrapped his sword, and dug a trench to set the axes up, all in a line, and trod the earth down flat. They were amazed to see him work so neatly, though he had never seen it done before. He stood astride the threshold and began to try the bow. 3 times his muscles trembled, straining to draw it back. 3 times he failed to string the bow and shoot through all the axes. He would have tried a 4th time. He was keen to keep on pulling, but Odysseus shook his head and stopped him. And Telemachus says, "Ugh, it seems that I will always be too weak and useless. Or perhaps I am too young and inexperienced at fighting in self-defense when someone starts a quarrel. You're all stronger than I am. You try and we can end the contest." With these words, he set the bow down on the floor, propped up against the polished, double-jointed door, and tucked the arrow up against the handle. He sat back down where he had sat before. Antinous called out, "Now, friends, get up from left to right, beginning with the man next to the wine slave." They agreed. The first was Leodes, their holy man, who always sat in the farthest corner by the wine bowl. He was the only one who disapproved of all their bullying. He grasped the bow and stood astride the threshold, and he tried to string it, but he failed. His hands were soft, untrained by labor, and he grew worn out trying to pull it back. He told the suitors, "My friends, I cannot do it. Someone else should have a turn. This bow will take away courage, life force, and energy from many noble young men. But better we should die than live and lose the goal for which we gather in this house every day. Each man still hopes for marriage with Odysseus's wife, Penelope. But if one tries and fails to string the bow, let him go use his wealth to court some other fine, well-dressed Greek lady. After that, Penelope will marry whichever man can bring most gifts for her, the man whom fate has chosen." With these words, he set the bow back down and leaned up against the polished, jointed double door, tucking the pointed arrow by the handle. Antinous responded with a jeer. My goodness, Leodes, what scary words! All your tough talk has made me really angry. You cannot string the bow, so you're claiming that it will take the life from proper men? You surely were not born for archery. The rest of us are actual warriors. We will soon string this bow. He told the goatherd, Melanthius, come on now, light a fire and pull a chair beside it with a fleece and bring out from the pantry a big hunk of fat so we young men can warm the bow, grease it, and try it, so end this contest. Melanthius obeyed at once. He lit a blazing fire and pulled a chair beside it, spreading a fleece on top, and brought the wheel of fat. The young men warmed the bow, but still they could not string it. They were far too weak. Antinous and Eurymachus, the leaders, strongest and most impressive of the suitors, had still not had their turn. Meanwhile, the swineherd and cowherd had both gone outside the house. Odysseus himself came after them. And when they were outside the gates, beyond the courtyard, in a friendly voice, he said, Cowherd and swineherd, I am hesitating whether to speak out openly. My impulse is to be frank. What if some god should guide Odysseus, and suddenly, as if from nowhere, he was here? How would you act? Would you be with the suitors, or with him? How are your hearts inclined? And the cowherd said, Oh, Father Zeus, please make this wish come true, that he may come. May spirits guide him home. Then you will see how well prepared I am to fight for him. Eumaeus prayed, in turn, that all the gods would bring Odysseus back home. The man who thought of everything now knew their minds, and said to them, I am here now. I suffered terribly for 20 years, and now I have come back to my own land. I see that you two are the only slaves who welcome my arrival. I have not heard any others praying I would come back to my home. I promise, if some god brings down the noble suitors by my hands, I will give each of you a wife and wealth and well-constructed houses near my own. You two will be Telemachus's brothers. Now, let me show you clearer proof so you can know me well and trust me. See my scar made by the boar's white tusk when I had gone to hunt on Mount Parnassus with my cousins? So saying, he pulled back his rags and showed the great big scar. They stared and studied it. They both burst into tears. They threw their arms around Odysseus and kissed his face and hugged him, overjoyed at seeing him. Odysseus embraced them back and kissed them. They would have wept till sunset, but he stopped them and said, Stop now. If someone steps outside and sees you crying, they may tell the men. Go in, not both at once, but taking turns. First me, then you, then you. And this will be our sign. When all the noblemen refuse to let me have the bow and set of arrows, then you must bring them through the hall, Eumaeus, and put them in my hands. Command the women to shut up tight the entrance of the hall and go to their own quarters. If they hear men screaming or loud noises, they must not come out, but stay there quietly and work. And you, Philoetius, lock up the gates leading out from the courtyard with the bolt and put the rope on too. We must move fast. With that, he went inside and sat back down on the same chair he sat on earlier. Then the two slaves went in. Eurymachus was handling the bow and warming it, turning it back and forth beside the fire. But even after that, he could not manage to string it, and he groaned and yelled in fury, "This is disastrous for all of us. I do not even mind so much about the marriage. There are lots of other women on Ithaca and in other cities, but that we should be proven so much weaker than King Odysseus, that we should fail to string his bow. Our deep humiliation will be well known for many years to come." Antinous said, "No, Eurymachus, it will not be like that, as you well know. No one should shoot a bow today. It is a feast day for Apollo. We should sit calmly and leave the axe heads standing there. No one will come and take them. Let the boy pour wine so we can make drink offerings and leave the bow for now. At dawn, call back Melanthius to bring the finest goats so we can make our offerings to the god Apollo, lord of archery. Then try the bow again and finished up the contest." They all agreed with him. Attendants poured water to wash their hands. Boys began to mix the wine in bowls and poured a serving in every cup so they could make libations and drink. Odysseus, the lord of lies, had carefully considered how to fool them. He said, "Now hear me, suitors of the queen. Let me reveal the promptings of my heart. Eurymachus and Lord Antinous, I ask you specifically because you spoke so well. Now, set the bow aside and turn toward the gods. At dawn, the god will choose the victor and give him success. For now, give me the polished bow, so I can try my strength and find out if my hands still have the suppleness and vigor of my youth, or if it has been lost in all my years of homelessness and poverty." They bristled, nervous, and in case he strung the polished bow, Antinous said, "Foreigner, you fool, are you not grateful that we let you stay here and eat with noblemen like us and share our feast and hear us talk? No other beggars can hear our conversation. The good wine has made you drunk. It does not have that effect on those who gulp and fail to pace themselves. Wine even turned the famous centaur's head when Eurytion visited the Lapiths inside the house of brave Pirithous. The wine made him go crazy, and he did terrible things. The warriors were outraged and dragged him from the house. Their ruthless swords cut off his ears and cropped his nose right off. He wandered, still insane, and blown about by gusts of madness. From that day, the centaurs and humans have been enemies. His drinking was harmful to himself. If you should string that bow, it would be worse for you. No man will treat you kindly in our house. We will send you by ship to Achaetus, the king of cruelty. You will find no escape. Sit quietly, drink up, and do not quarrel with younger men." Astute Penelope said, "No, Antinous, it is not right to disrespect a guest Telemachus has welcomed to this house. And do you think that if this stranger's hands were strong enough to string the bow, he would take me away to marry him and live with him? Of course not. He does not even dream of such a thing. No need to spoil the feast by worrying about such things. There's no need of that." Eurymachus said, "Shrewd Penelope, it is indeed unlikely that this man would marry you, but we would feel ashamed if some rude person said, 'Those men are weak. They court a fighter's wife, but cannot string his bow. Some random beggar has shown up and strung it easily and shot right through all of the axes.' They will talk like that, and we will be humiliated." Calmly, Penelope replied, "Eurymachus, people who waste the riches of a king have lost their dignity. Why fuss at this? The stranger is quite tall and muscular. His father must be noble. Go on, give him the bow and let us watch. I tell you, if he strings it, by the blessing of Apollo, I will give him a proper cloak and tunic, fine clothes and sandals, and a two-edged sword and dagger, sharp enough to ward away both men and dogs, and I will help him go wherever he desires to go. With quick intake of breath, Telemachus replied, No, mother, no one has a better right than I to give the bow to anyone or to refuse it. No one on this island or out toward the pasture lands of Elis, and no man in this house can force my hand, even if I should choose to give the bow to him to take away. Go up and work with loom and distaff. Tell your girls the same. The bow is work for men, especially me. I am the one with power in this house. She was amazed and went back to her room, taking to heart her son's assertive words. Inside her bedroom with her girls, she wept for her dear husband, her Odysseus, under clear-eyed Athena let her sleep, until clear-eyed Athena let her sleep. Meanwhile, the swineherd lifted up the bow. The suitors made an uproar. Dirty pig man, where are you taking it? Are you insane? The dogs you raised yourself will eat you up when you are out there with your pigs alone, if we find favor with Apollo and the other deathless gods. He was afraid, because there were so many people shouting inside the hall, and set the bow he carried down on the ground. Telemachus called out in forceful tones, No, Grandpa, keep on going, keep carrying the bow. You will soon see you have to choose which master to obey. Though I am younger than you, I am stronger. Watch out, or I will chase you to the fields, pelting your back with stones. I wish I had an equal edge on all those who invaded my home to court my mother and make mischief. I would soon throw them out and make them pay. At that, the suitors all began to laugh. Their anger at Telemachus was gone. Eumaeus went across the hall and gave the bow to competent Odysseus. And then he summoned Eurycleia, saying, Telemachus gave orders, you must lock the doors into the hall and tie them fast. If any of you women hear a noise of screaming men, stay up there in your quarters. Do not come out. Keep quiet and keep working. After that, she held her tongue and locked the doors that led into the feast hall. Philoetius scurried outside to bolt the outer gates that led into the courtyard. On the porch lay a fresh knotted cable made of byblos. With that, he tied the gates, rushed in, and sat back down, and looked toward Odysseus. The master was already handling the bow and turning it this way and that to see if worms had eaten at the horn while he was gone. The suitors told each other, He stares at it if he were an expert in bows. He acts the part. Perhaps he has a bow like this at home or plans to make one. See how this pitiful migrant fingers it. One confident young suitor said, I hope his future luck will match how well he does in stringing it. So he had tricked them all. After examining the mighty bow carefully, inch by inch, as easily as an experienced musician stretches a sheep-gut string around a lyre's peg and makes it fast, Odysseus, with ease, strung the great bow. He held it in his right hand and plucked the string, which sang like swallow song, a clear, sweet note. The suitors, horrified, grew pale, and Zeus made ominous thunder rumble. Odysseus, who had so long been waiting, was glad to hear the signal from the son of double-dealing Cronos. He took up an arrow which was lying on the table. The others were all packed up in the quiver, soon to be used. He laid it on the bridge, then pulled the notch end and the string together, still sitting in his chair. With careful aim, he shot. The weighted tip of bronze flew through each axe head and then out the other side. He told his son, Telemachus, your guest does you a credit. I hit all the targets and with no strong effort strung the bow. I am still strong, despite their jibes about my weakness. Though it is daytime, it is time to feast, and later we can celebrate with music, the joyful part of dinner. With his eyebrows he signaled, and his son strapped on his sword, picked up the spear, and took beside his chair next to his father, his bronze weapons flashing.